Hello, hello. Good evening, good afternoon. Wow, it's so dark outside. Good afternoon, world. Good afternoon, America. This is WCEG Talk Radio. It is 10/27/2025, and I am so happy to be with you. Uh, I'd like to welcome everyone to Issues and Answers on the WCEG network, where we speak life into the community. I sincerely hope that whatever part of the world you are in today, that you are having a great time, that it's a beautiful day. If there's not sunshine over your head, let there be sunshine in your heart. Okay. Uh, Many of you know how to watch this broadcast on Issues and Answers. And if you don't, here are some easy steps in case you're listening to us on YouTube. Just log on to WCEGTalkRadio.com on your computer or mobile device. Click the red icon that says live, and you'll be right here with us. You can watch us live on your smart TV. You may access us via the WCEG channel on Roku, YouTube, Fanbase, Blue Sky, and Twitch. I was just looking at Blue Sky this morning, listening to Mr. Kevin Krause. We'll get into him later. You can watch us live on Facebook, LinkedIn, and other social media platforms. If you missed the live broadcast, as I said before, you can always view us on YouTube at any time after the airing of this live broadcast. If you have Alexa, just say, Alexa, please play WCEG Talk Radio, and you'll be right there. You can download our free WCEG mobile apps at any time. You can listen to us on any of our 12 podcast distribution platforms. Now, let me say this, especially today. Before we begin this installment of Issues and Answers with your host, Norman A. Carter Jr., and my guest, Miss Jessica Fore, please understand that the topics and opinions are mine and my guest, and neither reflect the opinions of staff and management WCEG Talk Radio. Good afternoon, Miss Ford.
Good afternoon. It's so nice to be with you again.
It is greatly my pleasure. We're Facebook friends. We go back and forth over social media, and I just enjoy your perspectives and where you're coming from. Let me give our listeners and viewers a little snippet of your background. You're a Georgia born. You have a bachelor's degree from Uga University of Georgia. You are a former candidate for the United States Congress for Georgia's District 10, Congressional District 10. You're a realtor, musician, and an anti-abuse advocate. And this is not, of course, this is not your first time here on WCEG. I just like to welcome you back and hope we can have you on here many, many more times.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your perspective as well and the work you do.
Uh, you know, and this is going to be a rather freewheeling conversation, folks. We're going to talk about so much contemporary issues. I just like to give you a little more snippet of Miss Ford's background that I'm not sure she's prepared to hear right now. But she is a very forward-speaking, courageous activist, and she doesn't come by that lightly. As I did a little tiny bit of research, that is in your genetic makeup. Um, I read a little bit about this second lieutenant, Mary Schindelbauer.
Yes, sir.
Wow. She was a World War II combat nurse, and she's your grandmother.
She
And
is.
she was over there on D-Day, helping out our troops. Um, that takes a lot. That takes a lot for someone to, um, as a nurse, to be. You're definitely in a combat zone, under fire, and she did a lot of great things. And here you are.
Yeah.
Here you are carrying on the legacy. So how has things been for you since the last election that you participated in?
Well, I mean, I think it's been the way that it's been for a lot of us. It's been extremely stressful to, just watch the direction that things have gone with the reelection of Trump and the deployment of all kinds of anti-democratic actions against immigrants and against civilians in foreign waters and against, in many cases, American citizens and people who are here legally with legal work permits. There just seems to be a multi-pronged deployment of all kinds of authoritarian actions and trying to stretch the boundaries and really do things that endanger people and that ruin people's lives. So it's been very dismaying to watch that and to try to figure out how to navigate it. I spent the last election cycle. I lost my primary, and then I went to work in every way that I possibly could during the general election cycle. I knocked close to 2,000 doors with different organizations, managed a couple of state house campaigns, went knocking doors with some local candidates, not just in Athens, but around District 10, kind of, leaving it all out on the field and doing everything that I could to try to avert the situation that we're in now. And we ended up here anyway, and um, it's it's really just something that I never thought that we would experience in the United States after what happened in World War II. I thought that, and this is probably naive of me, but I thought that we had enough grasp of history and enough access to information to not make those same kinds of mistakes again. And yet here we are, and there's a sizable portion of the population that is doubling down on all of that. So I think that this is a very dangerous time for the country. I still think that this is a very hopeful time because people, as much as people on one side of the aisle are doubling down on anti-democratic kinds of actions, there's a lot of us, including a lot of conservatives, who are resisting that and who are speaking out in favor of our Constitution and the common values that we have aspired to as Americans for centuries. I don't think that we've never met them perfectly, and a lot of times we've done a lot of injustice, and there's been a lot of structural issues that I think are boiling over to the surface, things that we thought we had tamped down with the Civil War and with the Civil Rights Movement that have kind of, they're sort of bubbling up and making a last stand in a lot of ways. But I think that the moral arc of the universe still bends towards justice, and I think that we've just got to work real hard to bend it. So,
And this is for those of you who are new to Miss Ford. These are not just concepts that she's just started thinking of in the past 6 months or so. If you go back, I have some written stuff from your campaign. These are things that you have talked about for years,
mhm.
and the fear is real. Do you think that we are witnessing at a time when there are certain, I have to put it this way, Republicans who are realizing that they have been duped, and they're beginning to look at this and say, "Hey, we need to pull back a little bit and look clearly at what's really happening in this country."
Yeah. Boy, I sure hope so. And I do see some evidence and some examples of that. I mean, I think a couple of really high profile examples. We've got Rand Paul, who is on the outs with the administration for very openly and rightly condemning the bombing of civilian boats in Caribbean waters off the coast of Venezuela. Um, just on suspicion or on an accusation of drug charges. These are boats that would have to refuel 20 times in order to reach the United States. And yet we have the U.S. military doing summary executions of people just based on a suspicion or an accusation of drugs, that's a war crime, and that's just absolute cold-blooded murder. We've got, even Marjorie Taylor Greene breaking from the Republican Party over the issue of the government shutdown and healthcare costs. where she is saying correctly that the issue here is not that Democrats are trying to offer free healthcare to illegal aliens. That is not a thing. People who are illegal immigrants can't sign up on the marketplace. But those who are receiving, healthcare subsidies to try to make it somewhat affordable, it's still not affordable to go to the doctor, even if you have
Right.
the subsidy, but to make it somewhat tenable to maybe be able to get some healthcare, that those premiums are set to go up 2 and 3 times as much. And so, we've got her breaking from the party as well. I think when you're talking with private citizens, I see a lot less. And this is just anecdotal. This is just what I am personally experiencing with others. I would like to see more realization and evaluation of, how did we get here, how did we end up going along with this, and maybe, hey, we are starting to feel some discomfort, and having that be okay, to acknowledge and to move away from. But it's really difficult, I think, people, for people psychologically to get there, because when you've invested so much,
Yes.
in one perspective, to get to a point, 10 years down the road and say, hey, maybe I was wrong about this from the beginning. That's a very difficult thing, for people to admit. And I
Yeah.
understand that a little bit, because I think that a lot of the dynamics that we're experiencing politically, um, they're happening on a national scale, they're happening on a corporate scale, but they're very similar to, what people experience in the context of abusive relationships. And I'm a survivor of domestic violence, have been involved with that advocacy for a long time.
I remember that.
Yeah, and a lot of the reason that I got involved with politics in a formal way for the first time, in the early 2020s, was because I saw some very similar dynamics with Trump as an abusive personality type, and then taking the Republican Party in this fundamentally, abusive direction that is very similar to high control religious environments. It's very similar to what domestic abusers do to isolate their victim and to keep them hooked into the relationship. Um, I think that a lot of regular voters are still very much in the dance of being stuck in that abusive dynamic, and in some ways being victimized by it themselves, and in other ways being complicit, in victimizing others. So yeah, it's a complicated thing.
Well, I think that going along that type of thinking, I'm thinking about Virginia Giuffre
Mm.
and the not only the abuse that she suffered at the hands of her abusers, but then we come back with this. Well, it's sadly it's political. It's become political, but she was re-victimized by so-called sane people, who put political expediency ahead of the welfare of a lot of these teenagers at the time
That's right.
who were vulnerable and sexually abused. And I posted about this several weeks ago, but I've had experience with this as a police officer, where uh, sexual abuse victims and victims of domestic abuse, domestic violence, a lot of the times they're blamed for what has occurred to them,
Yep.
and it's very difficult, very difficult anyway to get a compassionate ear. And in the case of Virginia Giuffre, they broke her. They broke her, and that's that's horrific. I
Yeah.
mean, this wound up taking her to her death.
Yeah.
Um, it's just sad.
It
Uh,
is.
and this leads into something else, and I know this is one of your uh, favorite topics, but Christian nationalism.
Yeah.
It's that, you know, how hypocritical is that?
Yeah. Pretty dang.
Yeah,
Pretty dang
yeah,
hypocritical, Norman.
yeah, yeah.
I mean, so So before I was involved in politics, um, and still in various capacities, my background has largely been in Christian music ministry and youth and young adult programs and things like that. Often with the United Methodist Church, often in non-denominational settings. I've worked with several different denominations and a bunch of different flavors of Christianity, all that I would pretty much characterize. Most of them have been pretty heavily white evangelical spaces, and so
Mhm.
that's the background that I grew up in. That's something that I leaned into very heavily as a young adult. Raised support as a missionary to work in unpaid internships with various Christian ministries and all of that. And when I went through an abusive marriage, and I went through a very dramatic series of events where the abuse became public, and I went through a divorce while having been serving on staff at a church as a worship leader. And that was in the Presbyterian Church in America at the time, which is a very heavily patriarchal denomination. It's a denomination that was formed in the 1970s for explicit reasons of uh, maintaining control and dominance by white men. They were explicitly against the civil rights movement. They were explicitly against interracial marriage. They were against women's ordination and all this kind of stuff. And um, and so I ended up in this situation where, in contrast to what a lot of people experienced, the abuse that I was going through was very well documented. There were a lot of police reports and audio recordings and eyewitness accounts and lots of things. So the abuse that I was experiencing was documented to an extent that even these patriarchal church leaders, there was no serious debate about whether or not I was a victim of domestic violence. And yet there was so much control and so many additional adverse actions taken by my religious community against me as somebody that was experiencing abuse. I ended up running that entire issue to the floor of the Presbyterian Church in America's General Assembly, and going public about it and being contacted by dozens of other women in the PCA and other denominations dealing with really similar dynamics of what they
Mhm.
experienced. But there was very much like this organizational, corporate, institutional interest in control and silencing, despite, in my case, even affirming that the abuse was taking place. And the thing that I began to notice and learn about is that abuse, all kinds of abuse, whether we're talking about whether it's sexual violence or whether it's molesting kids or whether it's domestic violence, it's all based on power and control. It's all
Mhm.
based on somebody who feels entitled to establish or exploit a power imbalance over somebody else, and use coercion for sport or for personal gain or for various motivations, to dominate and harm their victim. And the thing is that the power dynamics that exist in domestic violence exist in group situations that are trying to maintain power and control over certain people. And so that
Mhm.
includes, high control religious environments. And then that has been, it's not just noticing those same dynamics in a lot of the kind of social justice situations that we deal with in the United States, and in a lot of the things about Trump's particular personality type. Um, but it's watching even some of these same high control religious communities getting, like forming alliances with MAGA politics in order to bring that into the public sphere, and to not simply be involved in harming abuse victims in their own ranks in their own churches, but to co-opt the federal government to start doing that publicly, and to try to establish kind of a theocratic, high control religious environment through the federal government backed by state violence. So that whole thing is very familiar, and it's very disturbing to watch play out in public events.
I noticed that on several of your postings,
Mm.
you basically say that if you're a follower of Jesus, how could you be comfortable with this particular situation or with
Yeah.
that? And it's that type of reasoning or their type of um, reasoning, if you can call it that, that makes Jesus sort of less important
Yeah.
or basically a minor figure. Um, it's really it's unsettling,
It
and
is.
I I talk about this often. I have uh, even had to mention this in even my own church where um, I have seen people say things and do things that I'm thinking in my head, and I've said this out verbally to them. Uh, this is not Christian
Yeah.
behavior when you marginalize people because of their race or their sex.
Right.
Um, and it's just the best example I can give you is the Christian nationalism that became the foundation of the Nazi Party.
Hmm.
That was based on Christian nationalism
Yeah.
and the the false narrative that Jews were the enemies. Well, this is rather Machiavellian because now we're making uh, Latin and South Americans the enemy,
Yeah.
and we're marginalizing them, and that's I don't understand it. We're trying to do regime when you talk about the boats
Hmm.
being bombed, which is everybody in America with half a brain needs to know that that's illegal.
Yeah.
You don't bomb fishermen.
Right.
They don't.
Well, and
You
for that matter, we don't bomb drug dealers.
true, true.
That's if there were some proof of guilt, that would still not be an issue for bombing. So
And
yeah.
the same technology that we're using to bomb people, and we don't know whether they have drugs or not.
Yeah.
And they're non-combatants. They're not shooting back.
That's right.
If they were actually you believe them to be drug dealers, we have the technology to follow them till they get into coastal waters.
Yeah.
And we have an adequate Coast Guard that could intercept them. And unlike what Trump just said recently, you're not going to outrun a Coast Guard boat. And if you try to outrun one, you have another one to
Yeah.
deal with. So um, it's that type of fallacious reasoning and thinking that's being put out there. And there are undereducated people who are just grabbing onto this nonsense.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, this is is turning us from a democracy to an autocracy
Yeah.
with a dictator, and
Yeah.
it's very unsettling.
Yeah.
And how many followers do you have? Because
I don't know. I mean, not tons. Like, we're talking a few thousand maybe. So yeah.
one one of the things that I looked at is that when I look at your platform,
Mm.
your former platform, and I look at things as they have been evolved, and I said this uh, months ago, as things have evolved over time, had those people who either sat on their butts or voted for the other candidate, do they ever look back and say, wow, we missed an opportunity here? Because your points of view are that you put forth on your platform are extremely relevant today
Yeah.
to what's going on. Extremely relevant. Everything from guns to abuse, uh, abortions,
Mm.
uh, women's rights. all of these things are being trampled upon right now.
Yeah.
Uh, and it's amazing. And I wonder if at some point those who voted against you or didn't vote at all are doing some soul searching and saying that they really missed an opportunity.
I mean, you hope that one would, but unfortunately, a lot of times people tend not to do that. People tend to double down on the
Yeah.
actions that they've already taken, and also just politics is people are cynical about it for a good reason. And there's a lot of stuff that I realized as a candidate that I would have had no idea about as a voter. Even ways that the Democratic Party itself, it claims to be the party that's for the working class, but when you start running for office and you start doing things, you realize how much money enters into it and how much you are judged based on how much money you have, and how much things are kind of structurally set up to favor candidates that have some level of being supported by family money or something like that. And so if you are actually a genuine working person who is trying to get a message out, and you're trying to do it on a shoestring budget, and your
Yeah.
peers and the people that you have to fundraise from are not deep pocket people, it can be really difficult to get enough bandwidth out there to even get your message across in the first place. And then you kind of get stereotyped about for shallow reasons. Where are
Mhm.
you from? What do you look like? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah. But the big problem in politics, and a big problem in church leadership and other situations like that too, is that abusive people who have a really strong will to power and control over others, are the kinds of people who are drawn to running for office, and they're drawn to leading organizations, and they're drawn to situations where they can exercise power and control. And so there's politics and religion are both very conducive to elevating these abusive personality types, or if not abusive, at least compromised mercenary personality types who will kind of they're in it to advance themselves. They might have some good ideas that of what they'd like to do for other people, but when it comes down to it, it's about advancing themselves and protecting their position and protecting their power. And the compromises that are expected of you begin very, very early. The people who want to donate money and tie it to, and then you're going to go and vote like this, and you're going to do this for me, and you're going to,
Hmm.
stuff like that. The kinds of deals that people try to cut, even, just right out of the gate. Um, yeah, there's some interesting things that take place surrounding all of that.
You remind me of a program we had here on WCEG, I guess it was last year, about church politics.
Yeah.
And a lot of what you're saying is absolutely uh, true. Uh, did I miss something, or has Donald Trump uh, produced his tax returns
I
from
haven't
years
seen
ago?
them. I haven't seen his healthcare plan either.
Yeah, I read a post today, and it was very accurate. We're talking about the healthcare plan, where it says, I don't know if it was on your page or someone else's, where the person said that Johnson, the Speaker of the House, stated that the Republicans are in the process of working on a health plan.
Hmm. We've been
And
hearing that for a decade.
yes, yes, and that's what that was exactly like. Really? Okay, we're supposed to believe that.
Mhm.
And I have a videotape of a State of the Union message from President George Bush, uh, many years ago, of course. One of the things he talked about in that message was universal health care. And that's the antithesis of what the MAGA movement, I'm going to call them a cult, because when you have a cult, you have tunnel vision. You can't see one way or another. And I mean, he was proposing something like that years ago. decades ago, and now it's become uh, a pariah. That's a pariah. Universal health care? What?
Yeah.
Are you kidding? You know, and
Right.
meanwhile, those folks who are totally against it have free health care for life. They're not affected. Their supporters, their main financial supporters, aren't worried about universal health care because they're in good shape. But folks in Appalachia continually vote against their own interests
Yeah.
because they buy into um, a fallacious philosophy.
Yeah.
It's just bizarre.
Well, I
Just
mean, one of the things that I think is going on there is that groups tend to take on the characteristics of their leaders. They tend to emulate the personality of their leaders, and when you have somebody, who I believe is a very textbook diagnosable sociopath like Trump, he's not just a
yeah,
sociopath. He's what we would call in the abuse survivor advocacy community a dark tetrad, meaning sociopathic, narcissistic, Machiavellian, and
yeah.
sadistic, like all that stuff together. But when you have somebody who is a very manipulative, abusive personality type, they will often in like they're often willing to incur some harm to themselves as long as they feel like they can inflict more harm on their victim.
Mm-hmm.
If they can express their power and control in a way that really, really hurts somebody else, even if it's not in their own best interest, then it's worth it. And a lot of times, if you really drill down the mindset behind the opposition to universal health care, it's this idea that, well, I don't want any penny of my tax dollars subsidizing anybody that I don't like or that I don't think deserves it being able to go and get medical care. It's the idea that, well, this might hurt me, but it'll hurt somebody else more, or feeling like, well, I've got a good job and I shouldn't be affected, so let's take it away from this other person. But all that's going on is it's just rising. It's just raising the costs across the board for all Americans because healthcare is not being approached as a human issue. It's being approached as an issue of corporate profit and an opportunity to extract everybody's any kind of wealth or resources or property that somebody has been able to earn and save up over their lifetime. Well, now you've got a cancer diagnosis, and now a corporation is going to get all of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's That's the situation that we have. We can't, so for some reason, we can't catch up to all of our peer nations in terms of wealthy democracies all over the world that take care of their citizens and make sure that people have the right to see a doctor and not go bankrupt.
Now you're talking socialism.
And people who will say that socialism can't tell you what socialism is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I to your point, the pandemic should have been the test tube lesson for us all
Yeah.
because uh, I'm sure that this came up during that critical period where people were saying, we need to take care of poor people the same way we take care of everybody else, because if we don't, then this is going to continue and it's going to get worse, and more people are going to die. Um, and to me, that should have been the fulcrum that would have, okay, given us leverage to uh, to really embrace this idea rather than run away from it.
Yeah.
And there's a price there's a price to pay uh, nationally nationally for it.
Yeah.
Uh, there was something interestingly that you posted about dealt with Roosevelt, President Roosevelt, and the reason why we talk about um, minimum wage.
Mhm.
Do you know what I'm talking speaking of?
Vaguely.
Okay. Uh,
Yeah, I mean,
yeah. I should have written it down, but the idea was that what the purpose of establishing a minimum wage was was to keep everybody at a certain level where everybody who was working a 40-hour week
Yeah.
wouldn't
Yeah.
have to could live at a level where they're not worrying about paying their rent
Yeah.
or their mortgage or
Absolutely.
buying food, uh, to be able to keep up with the cost of living as is. And that has totally not been done.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we haven't had a minimum wage increase since what, 2009 maybe? That
Yeah,
something like it. It's still the federal is still what, $7.25 an hour or something like that.
right.
Um, yeah, it's absurd. We have there is no longer any state in the country where someone working minimum wage can afford a basic apartment. It's getting to the point. It used to be that a minimum wage was a living wage, and you could afford an apartment. And if you wanted to get a roommate and save up money, then you could do that, and you could move
Mm-hmm.
towards, getting towards home ownership. And now, not only can you not afford an apartment on the minimum wage or on just basic, kind of retail wages, if you go and get a regular job making $15 to $20 an hour, you're not just struggling to afford an apartment now, you're struggling to afford a room in an apartment. It's becoming really common to have, four working adults share a two-bedroom place, or people are having to live with their parents for much longer than previous generations, and having to delay marriage and children, and all the things that make up what we would consider just kind of like a meaningful adult life, just hitting those milestones. And it's not an individual failure, it's the way the economy is across the board.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you are, in one of the upper percentiles for income, it's something like 60% of working Americans now are not able to afford a basic standard of living, just basic housing, basic transportation, nothing fancy, just meeting normal needs. And that's a real failure of us as a society, I think.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Um, let's. I hate to go here, but what is your opinion of the poop video?
I mean,
Is you
it's absolutely horrible. It's absolutely juvenile and disturbing, and kind of it's crazy that anybody looks at that and is okay with it in any way. I mean, that seems like something that would, if we lived in any kind of normal time, if it wasn't just rapid fire outrage, thing after thing after thing, that or any individual action that Trump ever does would almost be enough for impeachment. It's that in 1 week we had he's going to have an AI video dropping poop on peaceful protesters. He's going to go, unilaterally tear down the east wing of the White House. Going to go blow up some more boats, and we've got troops marching into American cities, and his supporters are still like, what, cry some more, libtard. It's there's the goalposts on what's normal and what's acceptable have moved so far, that something like that, I think anyone else anywhere in a democratic country anywhere in the world would look at that and say, oh my goodness, why won't people wake up about this already? And yet it's barely a blip here. um, Sometimes I go and I'll check in. I don't have cable, but I'll go online after the fact and like try to see what was reported on major news networks the night before. And I went and pulled up ABC to see what their coverage
Mhm.
was of the poop video and whether or not they were going to say anything about it. And they just had a real quick snippet that was like, President Trump posting a video of himself as a king flying a plane that says King Trump. Anyway, next story. They didn't mention anything
Yes,
about it.
right. And sadly, this is an action of a demented mind.
Yeah.
And this man sits in the presidency, and the people who are part of that cult can't see that this is very, very, very disturbing. That the leader of a country talks about doing in his mind, doing something like this to American citizens.
Yeah. This is
But
what he's
just
sitting
because,
around
yeah,
fantasizing about,
yes,
you know?
exactly, exactly. And speaking of which here's the hypocrisy of it. You have he condemns the the peacefulness of the No King's Day. I think the only people who were arrested were MAGA folks attacking the peaceful demonstrators. He condemns that, but he salutes the insurrectionists from January 6th, 2021.
That's right. So
And
pardons him, potentially hires
yes,
him to be ICE, you know?
yes, uh, it's unbelievable. And I don't understand why more Americans, regardless of political party, aren't outraged by this.
Yeah.
On it's funny. I prayed, honestly prayed, from Friday through Sunday that there would be no news on the Monday on Sunday night or Monday morning where you would see ICE agents or police uh, pepper spraying protesters at the No King's Day.
Yeah.
It didn't happen. It didn't happen. 7 million people participated in a unified action, and it was peaceful.
Yeah.
It was peaceful. And hopefully that's the type of whatever motivated that will motivate people uh, to vote well
Yeah.
during the midterms and for the next presidential election, which I I firmly believe that we are looking at steps being taken to suspend that presidential election.
I agree with you. Yeah. I mean, when people show you who they are, believe them, you know?
Yeah,
We
yeah.
we and also one of the characteristic things that abusers like Trump do is they project onto other people and accuse what they are planning to do. And so in 2020, it was, the Democrats are planning to steal the election, and then he loses the election and tries to steal the election, tries to does incite mob violence, trying to overturn the election results and prevent certification. We've got situations right now where the administration is trying to gain access to voting machines at the state level. We've certainly got there have been lots of instances of trying to purge people from the voter rolls, of having insufficient numbers of machines in areas where they think that there are likely to be a lot more Democratic votes, a lot more people of color voting, things like that. So, I mean, we know that attacks on the 2026 election are not going to be restrained by anything but courts and the law. It's not going to be restrained by any kind of good faith. Oh, we won't do that by the Trump administration. They're going to
Mm-hmm.
do absolutely anything that they can to consolidate as much power as they can at any costs. Um, they don't care about the consequences to democracy, and they certainly don't care about the consequences to other people. In fact, if they can harm other people, then that is fun for them. That's not a
Yeah,
bug, that's a feature.
it's funny. We're not hearing too much from about what happened in Coffee County, Georgia,
Mm.
uh, with their intruding into voting machines. Uh, and this whole thing about maintaining power, and I'm going to go back to Venezuela for a minute, and maybe you're too young, but I'm going to also go back and look at the analogy we have in Cuba, where uh, under under Batista there was you had organized crime flourish. You had uh, big business people here in the United States, AT&T, the Hiltons, they were flourishing in Cuba. And then here comes Castro. And not that I'm for Castro, there's a whole lot I really don't like about what he did to that country. But uh, we were bent on regime change. This country, there. We wanted to get rid of Castro in the worst way. In fact, it's now an open secret that our CIA was working actively to assassinate him. Um, Today, we have the president of the United States who isn't the sharpest knife in the drawer, who has already told you that he's sending CIA operatives to Venezuela in order to do whatever they can to get rid of, to cause regime change in Venezuela. That's dangerous.
Yeah.
It's very dangerous. Maduro has done all the things that Donald Trump wants to do. There was a legitimate election. He says, "To heck with that. I'm staying in office." Uh, that's what dictators, that's what power hungry people do. Um, Malcolm X, many years ago, was that people theorized that he was assassinated because when Kennedy was killed, his statement was, "The chickens have come home to roost." And that was looked like, oh my gosh, what are you saying? This is awful. And there was, it's been alleged that there was some CIA involvement in his assassination. We're walking down that same road with Venezuela, and I think that, and you can jump in here at any time. I go back to Trump's last meeting with Volodymyr Zelensky, where he asked Zelensky, or the question was posed to Zelensky about his having suspended elections because with the war going on, it's hard to set up that mechanism for free elections. And Trump said, "Oh, that's something I have to think about," or words to that effect. And I think that that planted an idea in his head. And ever since then, we we've pulled our military in and said, "Okay, you either go along with what this man is saying or you get out." We're making police officers out of our military, which they're not trained for.
Yeah.
And then we are executing people from foreign countries, and we're not even without justification or proof that they're doing anything illegal.
Yeah.
And the word war, you keep hearing the word war.
Yeah. The
And
Department of War. That's
Department of War, yes. And I hate to say that a lot of Americans are ignorant. I would rather say there are a lot of Americans are lazy thinkers.
yeah.
That they can't see how this language and these actions are manipulating them into something or a situation that they really don't want to see happen.
Yeah.
And that includes those people here in the United States. And I've heard it personally, who are advocating for a civil war in this country. And for those of you who have not been or seen what war does, I mean, innocent people get killed. Let's go back to the Civil War. You had children and women who were non-combatants who were murdered, slaughtered. Uh, this is what a civil war does, and you have that's also part of the MAGA supporters. Uh, they
Yeah.
they they speak of that often.
Well, and there's people that don't see that as a downside. There are people that see that as a feature. You know, yeah, yeah, people die if there's a civil war, and so they're excited about other people dying. I mean, that is
Yeah,
part of the mindset that's taken place.
and I think you have to look and figure out, okay, why are people buying AR-15s and AR-15 like weapons? They're not self-defense weapons.
Yeah.
And no stretch of the imagination are they used can they be used for self-defense. and they are by title assault weapons. AR means assault rifle. That's what it is. It's an offensive weapon. And why would you need that to protect your family?
Yeah.
You don't. And I know that you have guns. Uh, I won't say that you're a gun lover, but you have experience with guns. I think you were part of a club or something.
I haven't been part of a gun club, but I've been to firing ranges and
Find your ranges. Yeah,
yeah. So
yeah, yeah.
I mean I know how to shoot, and I've grown up in the South and have had a lot of family that have been family friends that are gun owners and things like that, and have been accustomed to seeing firearms and to understanding how to handle them safely. And I don't have any objection to responsible gun ownership and things like that. But I think that we have really ditched the responsible part in the U.S. and it's real concerning. So
Very, very concerning. Can we for a minute before we get out of here mention the deification of Charlie Kirk
yeah,
and how there's a Twilight Zone, if I may go back several years ago, a Twilight Zone episode called Alive. It's a 1 hour, one of those 1 hour shows. And when Charlie Kirk was assassinated, murdered, uh, I immediately thought about that because it's not so much when that occurred, but it's the fact that he's become a martyr.
yeah,
And in this episode, and these were people who were devotees of the Nazi philosophy. And one of the things that came out is this ghostly figure was telling this particular gentleman, man, that the movement needed a martyr,
mhm,
and they needed a martyr from within. And I'm not saying that the MAGA movement manufactured a martyr. I'm not saying that at all. So don't do the Jimmy Kimmel to me.
yeah,
Uh, but that this man he's been deified. He's been given the highest medal that a civilian can receive in the United States, and he was a provocateur. You know, this man sowed hatred, um, and disinformation and misinformation.
yeah,
And yes, he was out there going to college campuses, inviting people to debate with him, but he was not the nicest person in the world.
yeah,
And it's become it's become almost dangerous to say anything against uh, Charlie Kirk. And yes, he had a right to speak, do whatever he can. Uh, he exercising his right to speech, to free speech, but just as David Duke has a right to free speech, which he has exercised. He's been kind of quiet lately, but uh, people of that ilk uh, are 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 out there, and they don't deserve to be assassinated for uh, for stating their point of view on or how life should evolve here in these United States.
yeah,
But uh, killing them does not make them saints,
yeah,
and I just think it's horrible. But
yeah.
anyway, so as we get down towards the close of this hour, and I think you and I could talk for about much longer than this. Are there any views that you would like to share, or any parting comments that you would like to share before we close out?
Uh, I think relating back to the Charlie Kirk situation and the Christian nationalism situation,
Mm,
I'll get pretty personal and pretty spiritual about my Christian faith to close us out.
please.
Um, There are people who call themselves Christians who want to follow Jesus. They want to be like Jesus of Nazareth. They want to do the stuff that Jesus of Nazareth said. And people who want to follow Jesus of Nazareth and embody his values, uh, they have a different relationship to the idea of power than people who want to just use the name of Jesus and the idea of Christianity as a rubber stamp or as a flag to validate their desire for power and control over others. When Jesus came, he said, I'm here to proclaim that the kingdom of God is at hand and the kingdom of God is within you. And what he demonstrated about his kingdom, which is a power structure, a kingdom is a system of government, is that it is an upside down kingdom. It is a way of relating to power that centers and elevates those who are most vulnerable in society. It is measured by care for the poor, the immigrant, the prisoner, the sick, the people who have been outcasts, especially of the religious establishment. That's what we see in the example and teaching and life of Jesus. What we see in Christian nationalism that aligns itself with the state and that tries to grasp for public validation of their position, and then power and control over others, backed by state violence. That is a fundamentally opposite idea um, than Christianity, and they can't coexist. And so I think that one of the things that I would say to especially anybody coming from the same kind of white evangelical background that I did, who may happen to watch your show, is you've got to choose who you're going to serve.
Mhm.
That you can either be somebody who follows the way of Jesus, or you can be somebody who follows the way of Trump. But those two things, that's like oil and water. That's like new wine in an old wineskin that breaks the wineskin and it all comes out. Um, we if you want to be a Christian, cool, have Christian values and follow Jesus. If you want to reject those values and say, no, I'm a nationalist, I'm a white nationalist Nazi person, then do that, but be consistent, because you can't have it both ways. So yeah.
Wow. And I like your analogies and your very accurate biblical references. Don't generally get that here. Uh, I but I look so forward to having you on this program, and sure enough, like to do this again with you at
Thank you.
another time. Uh, I think you bring a lot of factual information to our public, just as you do on social media. Um, I think you should have a bigger audience. I
Thank
I
you.
I, I really really do. Um, I've you're an enlightening individual, and on many levels. And yeah,
Well,
we'll
Norman,
talk
thank
more.
you. I appreciate you so much, and thank you so much for having me on again. It's always a pleasure to connect with you, and I appreciate you so much.
And please, I'll send you the link when this is over, and please share it.
Yeah.
Um, I think people need to actually hear you and see you. We see you on, we see your writings and your postings on Facebook and other places, but to actually see you and hear you speak, uh, I think it's I think you have a very important voice in our community.
Thank you so much.
And ladies and gentlemen, it's been great being with you for the past hour. I will say, because we talk so much about voting and candidates and politics, that I need to remind you that early voting ends October 31st, Halloween. If you need a signpost, that's the end of early voting uh, here in Georgia. And also, Election Day is November 4th. Uh, for your municipal elections, you need to vote at your city hall. But for your statewide elections, please vote at your proper county voting location and get that done. And that's on Tuesday, November 4th. Vote wisely, vote educated, and pay attention. Don't just vote party. You need to vote character, vote for ideas that not just benefit you, but benefit our entire community, and we'll be a whole lot better. So I'm going to sign off here. It's been great having you. It's been great being with Jessica. And we'll see you in a couple of weeks here on WCEG Talk Radio. This has been Issues and Answers with Norman A. Carter Jr. and Miss Jessica Fore. Thank you for joining us. Good night.